Okay, Neo 3. I'm going into this blind. I don't know what to expect. I have a handful of reviewers that are my favorite, but they're all talking about it for 30-40 minutes. So we're going to give Craze Gaming, I've seen his stuff before, a shot. Let's see how he does. And I've got a pretty good nose for bullshit, so we'll know if he's blowing smoke or not. Let's go.
So I'm going to be honest, I went into Neo 3 expecting a mess. On paper, a time-traveling plot spanning multiple eras.
After what happened to the last Capcom game I purchased on PC, which was Monster Hunter Wilds, and how I had to put it down because it was absolute garbage on a brand new PC with a 4080 Super. Beautiful ultra-wide monitor. I bought everything new last year. It still ran like shit. I mean, it looked decent compared to what most people were getting, but... And they just didn't support it. Now, I heard that that's fixed recently. Maybe we should jump back into that. Anyway, Neo 3. Please be good.
Smells like a desperate excuse to reuse old assets, and the pivot to a larger world felt like Team Ninja was just chasing industry trends, filling a map with checklists. But after finishing my first playthrough, I'm glad those cynical assumptions did not hold up.
Good.
Whether I was tearing through entire yokai armies or perfecting the high-speed acrobatics of the new Shinobi style, the sheer
That I wanted to hear more about. I love ninja style. Oh my god, please don't convince me to buy another game, please.
thrill of the core loop.
How optimized did it come out for PC? And how good was the translation? Because a lot of Capcom games, like what was it, something 2, the vaulting on top of monsters and fighting a dragon that ate your heart. The English version was just so hard for me to pay attention to. With the pawns. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. Make a comment. I forget what it's called.
Consistently outweighed the growing pains of the new scale. By splitting the identity of the game between the two styles, Team Ninja has built the most complex combat sandbox in the genre's history. However, that leaves us with one nagging question. At what point does this level of depth simply turn into clutter? Well, I'm going to answer as many questions as I possibly can in today's review, and on that note, I want to give a huge shout out to Koei Tecmo for providing an early review code for Neo 3. Now, in the previous entries, mastering the combat meant just learning the stances and the key falls, more or less, and that would get you through the majority of the game. In Neo 3, however, that feels like it's barely even scratching the tutorial stage. Having the gameplay split into the two identities, the heavy-hitting samurai on one side and the swift tool-focused shinobi.
Does that sound familiar? Heavy-hitting samurai and the ninja? Yeah, it's raising some hackles for me too.
On the other, ended up creating one of the most complex combat sandboxes I have ever seen in a Souls game. The sheer volume of weapons,
Demon in a bottle,
branching skill trees with abilities that transition into one another are enough to make even the most seasoned veterans sweat. Add style switching on top, and on paper it sounds like you may end up tying your fingers in a knot trying to play this game. But that is the trick. Neo 3's combat system offers freedom, not a mandate. Despite the overabundance,
which is what I love. You go watch my my other video that I'm posting soon about Ashes of Creation, and I rant and rave about how to make a good MMO and freedom in custom creation, and not just what your character looks like, but your abilities and your skills is what does it. Same with an open world RPG action game.
Of ways of playing and abilities to unlock, you can still find simple high damage synergies that may require just 2 button combinations and still beat the ever-living heck of pretty much most of the bosses in the game. But if you want to be a show-off, if you want to lab out insane transitions from weapon to weapon and style to style, the tools are there for you to use. Neo 3's combat feels more like being handed the keys to a hypercar rather than being constrained in a box and having to play in a specific kind of way. It doesn't care if you drive it at the speed limit or redline it into a corner, as long as you're the one in control. If you're a complete newcomer and got into the demo recently and for some reason found it daunting because of the sheer abundance of things to unlock, my advice to you:
that ninja looked really freaking cool.
is to just take it slow. 1, 2, or 3 abilities at a time, master those, and you don't even have to worry about style switching until you're ready for the next step. As a matter of fact,
That's good advice. I heard a thunk thunk. 1 second, I'm just gonna make sure. I think it was my dog sitting down. We got a 90-pound shepherd behind us, and his name is Kai, and he likes to make some noise when he sits.
fully finished my first playthrough solely with the shinobi style, just because I found it so agile and easy to maneuver. And it still offered me a lot of ways to go even more complex in terms of the combos I was able to perform between abilities of the same weapons and between different weapons you eventually
Am I gonna end up playing this, guys?
Get to use. However, before we jump into the map design, we do need to clear some of the terminology here first. Nioh 3 is an open field game, not a sprawling open world. It's essentially a series of massive interconnected combat zones. But while the scale has shifted, the philosophy has not. What this means is, if you were the type who found the previous games either bloated or repetitive, this new structure may not help with that. Actually, quite on the contrary. The map is, in the most literal sense, a checklist of things to do. Literally, when you open up the map menu, you see a checklist of things you're going to be given. You go to a point, you clear an objective, and you take
that works if you really like the combat and the enemies are varied.
Another box on the list. There's very little in the way of organic mystery or unscripted discovery. However, for the Nioh purists, the players who crave structure and want a clear roadmap for progression, this may actually be a win in the end. Every active and hidden yokai critter feeds directly into your skill tree and gear, and every single spot will give you something that's useful for progression. It's just that the scale and the stakes are much higher than previous entries. It's a very honest loop, really, to put it bluntly. The game tells you exactly what you need to do to get stronger and then just lets you do it on your own. Personally, I fall somewhere in between these two categories, but because of the time travel narrative that we're going to discuss in just a little bit, it did end up making that fatigue a little bit worse for me over time, especially as I was getting closer to finishing the story.
I'm really particular about that too.
Don't get me wrong, I do appreciate knowing where I need to go to get stronger, but there were more than a few occasions.
We sped things up by about 25% just for posterity's sake.
I could only roll my eyes, knowing I have to repeat a similar loop once again, but in a different era. And you do this 3 or 4 times just on the first playthrough. Remember, you still have New Game Plus. Admittedly though, you don't have to go through all of the maps if you don't want to, but I mean, if you want to go for everything and get the max possible upgrades, probably you're going to want to do that at least the first time. On the plus side, everything feels more integrated into the open field.
I always like games when you do character switching where when you switch you're doing it with a move, like you leap forward and your body transforms into the ninja as you do some kind of attack, or you smash the ground and you turn into the samurai as you do like a big bulking AoE, not just a normal character switch. I don't know what it is, but it leans into the fantasy for me and I like it. I'm going to close the door. The kid's crying. Mom's got it though. We're still listening.
Rather than being separate menu options to grind loot into, the Crucible mechanics do feel like they are part of the world itself. Functionality-wise, while the structure features more linearity compared to the rest of the maps, there's still room for discovery. As you battle more challenging yokai and get access to better loot, you'll also find interconnected tunnels here and adjacent routes with doors that can only be opened from the other side should you discover it. But often those rewards are worth it, like chests full of gear all the way to unique skills that further augment your powers. However, at no point did any of it feel unfair or overly difficult. It's not a brag on my part as I don't claim to be an expert, but a first playthrough should be treated like a tutorial. It's only once you get into New Game Plus and get access to higher difficulties when things change. Until then, you may need 4 or 5 tries at max to defeat even the tougher bosses, as the time to kill in this game isn't that long. That's also, by the way, a plus on my side. Also, the fact that once you break a yokai spirit, they are super easy to interrupt just adds an extra layer of satisfaction that you don't always see in games like these. Like, it's super easy to stagger bosses in this game. In fact, I never fought a boss in Nioh 3 and found any of it frustrating, like how it was the case with the previous Code Vein 2. It felt like victory was always within my grasp. I just needed to get better at it.
That I like, as an old gamer. That I like.
Having such a large weapon selection also made that process highly satisfying. Which also brings us to the next topic, the sound design. As somebody who got into the series relatively recently, I've got to say that this has been one of the most satisfying games I had the pleasure of hearing, I guess. I know some critics will say it's the same old, but why fix what's not broken? Just the combat and hits in general feel highly impactful. They
Good.
sound
It's
impactful
important.
to the point of surgical, really solid feedback that keeps that blood pumping. Great hitboxes too, and when you get a perfect parry or a perfect dodge in, it's just like chef's kiss. There's definitely a distinct feeling that makes the sound design very recognizable Neo, which didn't seem to change much from the previous games, but I don't
I'm gonna have to wish list this game. I know it. Fuck.
see why it should either. A huge part of the immersion also comes from voice acting. Admittedly, I played with the Japanese one, which I found absolutely top tier across the board. I'm a huge fan of Naoya Uchida. Some of you may recognize his voice work from characters like Madara or Azazel. He's one of the masters we get to train with in the game, and his voice work adds a layer of gravitas that fans of his work will really appreciate. Now, for a series that is
I can appreciate good voice work.
historically struggled to make its plot as engaging as its parries, Neo 3 takes a noticeable step forward. Our protagonist finally has a voice. They don't talk much, but they say enough to feel like a participant in the world rather than a mute observer. For me, like I said, I find time-traveling narratives usually a chore, and while occasionally confusing, is anchored by a cast of characters that did manage to get under my skin. I don't know if English voice acting would do the same for me, as I did not get a chance to try it yet though, but like I said, yeah, the Japanese one is top tier. The biggest surprise for sure is definitely the agency. I'm not sure if the previous Neo games had this, but there's quite a lot of agency, narratively speaking. I don't want to spoil anything here, but let's say your actions do carry genuine weight, culminating in multiple endings based on some of the key choices you get to make along the way. There is a pivotal choice with an emotional payoff at the end that brings a satisfying conclusion to the events that started in the beginning of the game. Now, is it a groundbreaking narrative masterpiece? No, not really, and I don't think it needs to be. At its heart, the story still feels like a vehicle.
It does need to be if it's a Capcom cost, though. I'm just saying it. If it's 80 Canadian dollars, I'm a Canuck. It better be premium or very replayable
To get you from one historical boss fight to the next, but by giving you, the player, a say in how the world ends up, Team Ninja has finally given us a reason to care about the people we're fighting for rather than just the loot they drop when the mission is over. As a final verdict...
Also, how are the PC controls for people that want to WASD it? I don't really like using WASD, but I love aiming with the mouse rather than a game controller.
Neo 3 is a game of a pretty interesting contradiction. It features arguably the most sophisticated, rewarding, and free combat system I have ever seen, yet it houses it within an open field structure that feels decade-old and a bit repetitive. It gives you the keys to a hypercar, but asks you to drive it through a series of chores. If you can look past the checklist fatigue and the recycled presentation, you're looking for hundreds of hours of technical depth of the Shinobi and Samurai playstyle that you can even try then in New Game Plus for even more fun. Literally, this game is hundreds of hours long. That's pretty much it with the video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.
I'm torn. I'm torn, guys. I'm not sold. Craze Gaming, I'll definitely link your video in the description. The hundreds of hours and the good combat and the customizable combat and the ninja seems really good. The repetitive nature might bother me. I don't know. I think I'll know before refund time on Steam, though, if I want it, so maybe I'll give it a shot. Yeah, I think I will. Look out for more videos, guys. Fuck yeah. God, I wish MMOs were hitting a resurgence that RPGs are hitting right now. Gotta go. Love you.